dive straight in. So we'll go into today's schedule first of all. So I don't know if any of you want to mute yourself as well, just to stop any echoes. Lovely. Peace and quiet. Okay, so today's schedule, we're going to be running through a new video on how Google improves search and what Google have been up to recently, an introduction to SEO and user experience and how that ultimately can affect your search visibility. In 2021, page experience update, and seeing essentially what is involved with that and what that looks like. What does a bad user experience look like, and how does it frustrate potential customers and users? And tips to improve experience, full search engine optimization, a few useful tools, and then a quick summary, and we'll dive into a Q&A at the end. So first of all, Olivia is going to activate the video from our friends at Google, and it's a bit of a cop-out for a few minutes, but it's worthwhile you all watching and paying attention to. Olivia, you might want to unmute yourself for it, potentially. Olivia, we seem to be struggling to get any audio playing through right now. Do you want to make sure that it's picking up on-screen audio?
I'm not entirely sure why it's not picking it up, because I'm not on mute.
No, it seemed to work fine last time.
I mean, we can jump past the video if.
Tell you what, let's jump past it, and we'll share. If you can get the link for the video, and we can share that near the end. And I won't take a sip of my coffee, and we'll just move straight on to what is user experience for the time being.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
What is user experience? Well, like I said, we'll share you the video after, and you can have that with your post session coffee. So what is user experience? Simply put, it's the interaction that people have within your website and making sure that your website is fast, secure, it's easy to navigate, it gives people all of the accessibility that they need to find the things that they are looking for. So SEO and user experience has always had a relationship, and what I tend to say regarding search engine optimization is that it isn't really its own discipline. Actually, search engine optimization just overarches and encompasses all aspects of marketing, and it's really an aim of trying to ensure that the optimization that you are doing or the marketing that you're doing is aligned with the quality guidelines set out by the major search engines. So for many years, elements of UX have been rolled into SEO best practice. They have been made up as part of public algorithm rules, such as Google's public announcement that mobile friendliness is a ranking factor within its algorithm. And today, a lot of what influences user experiences are Google ranking factors. And some of them are quite public, some of them are not. And hopefully we're going to dive into a few of those today. So I'm going to try and break down some of the technical lingo on here and try to simplify it. But ultimately, the core web vitals that you can see on screen here relating to the new experience update, which will be becoming a full ranking factor in 2021, covers how fast your website is and the elimination of things within your website from which could slow it down. This could be excess code scripts which you have in there, plugins which you don't use anymore, which are ultimately out of date. Your website's mobile friendliness. Is your website safe to navigate? So does it have a SSL or secure certificate within there? And is there anything intrusive within that website from which is not native within its own content? And what I mean by that is, do you have iframes leading into other areas? Are you scraping content from elsewhere on the web and just recycling and repurposing, or are you adding real value? So all of these things are coming together into what is essentially one of Google's only public-facing algorithm updates. normally it's up to us SEOs to try to guess. And out of hundreds of rules, here's possibly 3 of those hundreds from which will have a important impact. So what does a bad user experience look like? We've all been there. Personally, I was earlier because our boiler is broken. And I'm trying to call a plumber. I'm going through somebody's website and I click on the mobile number and it doesn't click to call. And it's one of those really frustrating things. And then you have to highlight the whole phone number and then copy and paste it into the actual phone area of your mobile. And that is a hugely frustrating experience for people. And you know what, it really puts me off using that website again, and I'm likely to go to a competitor. Or the website isn't loading, and it isn't something that we should be checking on our desktops. The majority of traffic is coming from mobile devices, upwards of 70%, and that's only increasing. There is no return to desktop anytime soon. More people are mobile more than ever. So we need to be checking that our websites are loading really fast, both from a Android and a Apple and numerous mobile browser types as well. And when it comes to designing websites, we should be designing these websites mobile first and not desktop first. So that's really, really important. So some quick tips on ways that you can improve user experience for SEO. First of all, improving the load speed. So here's a great statement here from the BBC, where they noticed that for every second that a site takes to load, 10% of its users would leave. And that is actually something that's very true across the board for many websites. And actually, I would say the majority of websites that I optimize or look at, or my team looks at, typically takes between 6 to 10 seconds to load. And that can often be because they are vanity flooded. And what I mean by that is huge banner display images and slideshows which never actually get viewed properly. And actually, it's all things from which look pretty and have loads of aesthetics, but aren't actually adding real value to somebody's user experience and journey. Take a look at some of the most popular websites in the world, as I've talked about before, the Googles of the world, the Wikipedias of the world, the TripAdvisors, the Gumtrees. These are all very minimalist when it comes to heavy images, minimalist when it comes to heavy video content. They are trying to provide the answers in a contextual way to people's questions. And that's really what we need to try to get across. So me, looking for a plumber as an example, I just want to be able to call somebody and find out when they can come to my house. That is the #1 aim of me looking for a plumber, as it would be for a high percentage of people out there looking for something similar. So it's your job to try to shorten that journey as much as possible, and that feeds into your SEO score. So one really quick and easy way that you can check your website speed, and you can get this straight from the horse's mouth. This is Google's own page speed insights. We'll share a link over in the comments, and we'll leave a link at the end as well, or Olivia can pop it into the chat now. And then you can run your websites through this tool, find out your website speed. You can also use tools like GTmetrix as well. GTmetrix is a free tool which you can test from both 3G, 4G connections and mobile devices across a range of different servers worldwide so that you can check out the performance. Often with these tools as well, it's not just going to say if you pass or fail, but it's going to give you some clues about why your website might be slightly slow. So that's definitely worth taking a look. Some easy ways to rectify a slow website are caching your pages. And caching your pages is a bit like storing your favorite files in a bookmark so that when you revisit or when somebody revisits your website, then it's already remembering some of those core assets which can take a little while to load, which is why when you check out your website, it's typically loading much faster for you than a potential user who is out in the wild. So using a content delivery network is another really powerful way to increase your overall website speed. I try to describe this as having the ability to go from having a single track road pointing towards your business or your house to opening up to a couple of motorways pointing to your house. So instead of all of that traffic and all of those assets being fetched from different areas of the web and loading through this single one-track road, instead a whole motorway is opened up and all of that traffic can come through very quickly and simultaneously. And that you can use for Cloudflare is one of the most popular content delivery networks. And that is something that doesn't cost anything to use. You can set that up for free. All you need to do is follow the basic DNS instructions. And not only that, but you can typically get some free security thrown in as well, which can save you money in the long run. Compressing images before uploading them is another really useful asset here. Too many people take pictures on their mobile devices or upload images straight to their computer, which are 1,200 pixels by 1,200 pixels, when they only ever get displayed at 30 by 30. Now, what that is making your website do is load a huge image and then shrinking down when actually you just load a small image. And that's going to be a much faster experience for people accessing the website, but also for people just generally browsing through what could be a very image-heavy website. It could be an online store where there are dozens of images on there. So compressing and making sure that those images are as small as you possibly can when you upload them, and using modern file extensions with your images. So the latest versions of PNG and JPEG are going to mean that your images load much faster, and consequently your website will load much faster. Don't underestimate as well the power of web hosting and where your website is hosted. If your target audience is in England and you're targeting English people, and yet you're using something like Wix, for example, from which could have servers over in North America, then you can imagine the journey that it has to go on to go and fetch, render, and display information for your target customers. Ideally, you want to have your hosting as close to your local audience as you possibly can. So if you've got a UK audience, then you want to have either UK or at the very least European hosting. You certainly don't want to be having data centers over in Asia or over in the US, which is really, really common. And a lot of people don't understand or realize that. So increasing your server space, particularly when it comes to WordPress, is really important as well. WordPress websites have an interesting ability to fluctuate its usage quite heavily, and this can sometimes lead to downtime or loading issues on WordPress websites, which is why I would strongly recommend using a managed WordPress hosting facility, which you can get from companies like Fasthosts or Web.com or GoDaddy. You can get individual special managed WordPress hosting facilities and popping into your local network store, and they'll be able to advise you on the best possible solution for you. And then fixing broken links and redirects. It's an obvious one that Google has to navigate your website blindly. So it's sending in spiders into your website to follow links and then to pull and load all of that content. If you have broken links, if you have broken images, that is basically slowing down the website's ability to fully render as fast as possible, therefore slowing down your overall speed. So improving your website's navigation is another really easy way here. This is what I was mentioning earlier when it came to trying to get in contact with somebody to fix my boiler. I don't want to have to dive into 3 or 4 different pages to find the person's phone number. I just want a very clear call to action, click to call, and to go through that. So really think about when your customers are actually searching, do they want to see all of these amazing slideshow images of a man installing a boiler, or do they actually just want to know when that availability is and if they do emergency call outs? It's probably the latter. And it's also noting as well that every website obviously has a main navigation, and this should be hierarchy focused. So once again, you want to have the content from which you want to be most accessible for your potential customers to be at the top of that hierarchy, and then content which is maybe what we would call a bit more in depth. So somebody dwelling and spending a lot of time in your website, then you want that lower down that hierarchy list. So people can spend time maybe convincing themselves or going through FAQs. That information is not going to be as important as somebody hitting your website who's a potential new client, customer, or shopper, and you want them to interact and purchase as soon as possible. So my last slide before moving on to Olivia, or the last two slides, is basically being more mobile friendly. Mobile friendliness is something that we've been talking about for years in SEO. There really is no excuse not to be mobile friendly, but I would strongly recommend taking it a step further and actually doing mobile first. Mobile first fundamentally means that when you run your website in the mobile friendly test provided by our friends at Google, then it will come out with your mobile friendliness score, and your aim is to try to make that as good as possible. Not only that, but when you're designing or redesigning your website, you want to focus on what that experience is like from a mobile perspective. First of all, not, hey, this is what it's going to look like for 20% of my customers. Because you would never make any other decisions within your business based on 20% of your customers. You are surely making it on the 70-80% of your customers who are using mobile devices in this scenario. So spend more time on your mobile devices, and is something that I would get told off for in my household for saying. Spend more time on your mobile devices testing different entry points, both from advertising through to the actual experience on your website, and you're going to come across some really useful insights there. Olivia, over to you.
Sorry, I have to unmute in order to start talking. Hope everyone can hear me okay and that there's not any echoing. So my next point is being useful. So one of the biggest tips that I can give for improving users' experience and getting people to either buy off your website or give you a call or fill in a contact form is to make sure your content on your website is useful and fulfills a need or answers a question. In the example that Luke was talking about, his need was to call the plumber and get them to come out, but the website was not being useful because it was not fulfilling that need because he could not easily click to call the plumber. So a few sort of tips or points on a useful website. The first one is it meets the intent of the keywords it's targeting. So when people think about SEO, they think about, oh, what keyword do I want to target? But today SEO has changed in that it's more about the intent, so what the person wants to do. So if Luke searched, for example, plumbers near me, he needs to land on a page that shows that there's a plumber near him and that he can contact that plumber near him. So whenever you're trying to put content on your website, just make sure that every single page meets what you think a user would want to do if they land on that page. And it also needs to answer questions and solve users' problems. So that's where FAQs sort of come into play, for example. There's no point having a page on your site or having a website that doesn't help people, it doesn't answer their questions or their problems. That's where, for example, having the telephone number, that didn't help, it didn't solve Luke's problem in the context of trying to contact a plumber. It needs to be visually pleasing and easy to read, with text broken up by visuals, videos, headings, for example. One of the worst things that you see on a website, and especially as most users visiting websites are on mobile now, is that a mobile device is so small, and if you have just long chunks of text, someone's going to get bored very quickly and just leave. The way people and humans read is in a certain way that they need to be able to skim read as well. So if you land on a page, people just don't have the time to land on the page and sort of read every little bit of the page. So they need to be able to land on the page, read a heading, understand what's underneath that heading, have bullet points, for example, if there's a lot of information, or have videos that you could watch a 30-second video and understand what the page is about or answer a question, or even images to help understand. It really needs to be visually pleasing and not just big chunks of text. And when we talk about videos and images as well, also considering that site speed can come into play, so not having hundreds of videos on the page that are not compressed, or visuals and images. And then also being accessible to people with disabilities. The amount of times you go onto a website and can't read the copy without having to zoom in to be able to read it. When Luke says, for example, testing your site and going on it on mobile, have a look on your website on mobile. How easy is it to read the content on the website? If someone has if someone is blind, for example, or someone has bad hearing, things like videos, you need to have like captions, so that subtitles, so that people with screen readers can understand what the video is saying, for example. And then making and completing a form or purchase easy. People drop off if forms are hard to complete. So the more fields that you have, for example, so if you want someone to fill in a form in your website to contact you about a service, the more fields that you have that person has to fill in, the less likely they are to fill it in. So if you have a contact form, all you simply need is name, number, email address, and what their inquiry is, for example. Make it easy, or as people won't do it. It's not an easy user experience. And also the content on your website needs to be credible, authoritative, and relevant. Whatever your business is about, all the content on your website needs to be relevant to what it is about, and also factual and correct. If your, for example, your telephone number or if your address on your website is out of date, that's not credible. That's a bad user experience, because someone can't find your address and they don't know where they're going. Then image alt text, which I think we've spoken about this quite a few times now, but image alt text helps improve user experience for those visually impaired people that are using screen readers. So this is to do with the disability. There are billions of people with disabilities going onto websites each day, and obviously it will be hard for someone that doesn't have a disability to understand what it's like for that person. But an image alt text is something that you'll see it in WordPress and all different content management systems that you might use to upload images onto your website. There will be a thing that says alt text, and all you simply need to put in there is a description of what that image shows, just with hyphens in between each word. And then basically what the website does is, for someone that's using a screen reader, because they are visually impaired, it will read it out to them of what the image says to help them understand. And then broken pages. there's nothing worse. I think we've all landed on a page that says, sorry, this page cannot be found, or something. If someone lands on a broken page, they will leave a website and they won't do what you wanted them to do. So they won't necessarily contact you or buy a product, or stay on the website and look at the different sort of blogs or the FAQs on the website. I've got an example here of sort of a broken page on the website. And one tip I would like to give you is that you can optimize the broken pages on your website. So every website is going to end up with broken pages at some point, because it just happens. If you change URLs or you delete a page or something goes wrong, there's always going to be broken pages. But the best thing that you can do is, on a broken page, have some helpful links back to the home page or back to other pages, so that if someone does land on a broken page, they will go through to a different page on the website and they'll be less likely to leave. So if you have a website now, I'll ask you after this to go away and find out what your 404 page looks like, and see if on that you have an option for someone to go onto a different page or search something else on the website. A little bit of homework there. This is Airbnb's broken page. Then I think this is the final tip, but it's being safe and secure. So having a secure website, and by a secure website, I think you'll often see it if you use Google Chrome. When you land on a website, Google Chrome will actually say to you, this website is not secure, for example. A secure website is basically where you have a security certificate. That means that all the sort of information and details that you put in on that website are encrypted, and Google knows that website is secure. That has always been a ranking factor since 2014. It's not a hugely important factor, but it's more important now, mainly because Google is increasingly telling users when a website is not secure. So if someone lands on your website and it's not secure, they'll be told, and they'll probably be quite likely to leave as well. And additionally, a lot of other websites won't want to link to your site if it's not secure. Google Search Console. This is a screenshot of Google Search Console, which is another tool. We always give tools here because I think they're super useful, and even if you don't understand everything that's in the tool, you can just understand that, for example, it might say you have security issues, and all you need to do then is go down to your local network studio and say that, oh, my site looks like it has security issues, and then that can be looked into. For Google Search Console, you simply add your website to it, and down the left-hand side, you can click on something that says sort of manual actions or security, and there'll be a nice tick that will say no issues detected if you don't have any security issues with your website. But alternatively, if you do, there'll be sort of red security issues, and it will tell you all of the issues. For example, there might be malware, or someone might have hacked your website. There was a recent thing with WordPress where hundreds of thousands of WordPress websites got hacked. It is quite common and it can happen, but you just need to be able to fix it if there are security issues. And then, so finally, I want to give you some tools and some metrics to measure user experience. Often when we talk about user experience, you can ask someone to have a look at a website and say, you know, is this a good experience, but what does it mean, and how do you understand if your users are having a good experience on your website, if they're turning into customers, for example, or if they're not, and why? So the first tool that you might have heard of is Google Analytics. Even if you don't know your way around the tool, or you don't know what you're doing, there's some metrics that you can have a look at, or you can ask someone to pull for you. And they are quite actually simple when you know what they mean. So I'm going to go through these quickly. So bounce rate. This is the percentage of people that leave your website after only viewing one page or having not done anything. So if someone literally lands on your website from an advert you've done on Facebook, for example, and then they just don't do anything. They land on the website, they look at it, and they go straight away. For example, it might be because it loaded really slowly. Then you would have a high bounce rate. So that goes from 0 to 100. So I would say anything over sort of 70% bounce rate would be bad. A great bounce rate would be sort of below 40%. People would have different opinions, but you want your bounce rate to be as low as possible. And then time on page. This is simply how long people spend on your website. I would say the longer the better, but then it also depends what they're looking to do. So if it is just to land on your site and phone a telephone number, then that doesn't matter. So you can look at time on page in comparison to whether they've achieved the event you wanted them to. So if they clicked on that number and they phoned you. But ideally on pages where, if you have blogs on your website that you've been writing, or articles, you want people to spend a longer time on the site. And then conversion rates, this is the number of goal completions. So what goal completions are is if you have a form on your website, for example, and someone fills in that form, you can get your local nettle studio, if you're working with them, to set up a goal in Google Analytics, which basically is to track how many people fill in your form from your website. And then this conversion rate essentially looks at the amount of people that go to your website versus how many of those people actually filled in your form, for example. And this helps you understand whether people are finding your website useful, because if they're not finding your website useful, then they're probably not filling in your form or getting in touch with you. And then behavior flow. This is really useful. This shows you the journey that general people go through when they land on your website. Often it will be homepage, and then we'll go to a services page, for example, and then the contact page. But this can be really useful because you might have in your head the ideal sort of website setup and what your ideal customer would do and why you have your website. But actually, when people land on your website, they might do something very differently. And if they're not doing what you want them to be doing, it may be that you need to change the links or change the website navigation so that people do start flowing through the website in the way you want them to. And then finally, event tracking. This was the one I spoke about in relation to conversion rate. Anything you have on any page on your website, you can track what people do. So if there's a button, for example, if there's a video, or if you have a telephone number, if you simply have a telephone number that you want people to call, you can track how many people click on that and call you. And the reason all of these metrics for user experience are important is that they can help you understand if you've invested money, some of your marketing budget that you have each month, if you've invested that in search engine optimization, ultimately, yes, you care about ranking, so you might want to go from position 10 to position 3, but there's no point improving your ranking if for them people get to your website, they're not doing what you want, because the only reason you want to rank well is to get people onto your website to then get them to become a customer. So this stuff's really important to actually understand if you're getting any return on what you're spending on SEO and how many leads you're getting, for example, how many new customers. And then behavior tracking is also super useful. So there's something, if you have WordPress or some other websites, you can basically install something called Hotjar. And this isn't something you would personally necessarily do. It's something that the Nettle Studios can help you with, or there are plugins you can use, and there's a few different ways that you can install this. But what you can basically do is use this tool to look at heat maps, which is essentially a visual, which I'll show you in a minute, that shows how many people are clicking, scrolling, and moving around the page on your website. And you can also take recordings to see real actions of what people are actually doing on your website, which is quite freaky, but actually really useful. This is an example of a heat map. So essentially on the left-hand side, what you can see is the red, the yellow, the green, and the blue. And you won't be able to see it because you'd have to zoom in, but what the red is showing is down to the bottom of the red, how many users get to that part on your website. So of the 100 people that went to your website, 70% got to this bottom of the sort of red colour, and then down to the blue, for example, you'd say 10% of users made it here. So this really helps you understand that if you've got some really important information at the bottom of the page, probably most of your people that go to your website probably aren't seeing that. So anything that's really, really important needs to be at the top of the site. And also, if you have more important information further down the page, you need to try and get people down to that part of the page. And if these heat maps are showing that people aren't getting there, then you need to find out why. So I would also always recommend what we call this that people can see. So if you're on a mobile, it's what your people visiting your website can see without scrolling, and that's called above the fold essentially. So any important information, the most important information needs to be there, and also a call to action. A call to action is either a button, a telephone number, what the action you want them to do from your website. That call to action should always be as high up as possible. And then on the right hand side, we have click tracking. So basically, there's little heat maps where you can see that people are clicking on the website. So you'll probably see this a lot around where there are links in the sort of main navigation at the top of your site. But this is really useful because it will help you to understand if people aren't clicking where you want them to be clicking. Now, this is really, I suppose, in-depth insights. If you have a website and you have real specific goals for that website and you feel like those goals aren't being achieved, so if none of your customers are coming to your website, for example, and they're saying, no, I didn't go on the website, or I went on the website and I didn't know how to do this, and you're getting this feedback, this is all super useful to help you understand why things are happening. And then click tracking here. So here's an example of where you can see on this button, which is a call to action, there was 466 clicks on here, and of the percentage of people that went to this page, 7% clicked there, for example. So finally, just to give you the tools I've run through now, haven't got the links on here, but we can either post them in the chat, or if you type them into Google, they will come up straight away. So there's Google Analytics. If you haven't got that set up already for your website, I would highly recommend doing it. It is quite easy to set up initially, but then you might want some help to do the sort of specific bits once it is set up. Hotjar, if you have WordPress, have that. If you have other content management systems, there should be sort of plugins and things you can use to use this tool. Google Page Speed Insights to understand how slow or fast the website is. And then Google's mobile friendly test to understand if it's mobile friendly. And the reason these tools are useful is because user experience, so how people perceive their experience when they go onto a website, is so important, and it's becoming more important. So it's really important to use metrics to understand how people are perceiving their experience on your website. So just a summary of what we've gone through today. If you're looking to invest in your website going forward, it's really important to optimize your site speed. So make sure your website is fast, and you need to test that because you can't just be clicking onto your website yourself, because it's going to be very different for every person that's going onto the website. Security, usability, how easy it is, accessibility, and usefulness. What you can do is, as well as using the tools and the metrics we've spoken about, you can simply ask someone that you know or a few people to say, can you go on my website and just let me know of any observations or anything you found difficult or annoying or anything you couldn't find. And then use behavior analytics, which I've mentioned about. Behavior analytics is all these metrics and these tools that you can use to understand what people are doing. Use tools to measure how user-friendly your website is, and make sure you implement tracking on your website, because there is no way that you can measure success of your website if you don't have any tracking in place. The only thing you could possibly do is if you have a shop and someone comes into the shop, you could say, how did you find out about the shop? And they might go on the website. But how much better would it be for you to, if you have tracking that you can understand how many people have called you or visited you because of finding your website from Google? And I think that's everything. If we have any questions, I'm sure Luke and I would be happy to answer them if you just want to put them into the chat or come off mute.
We'll start off with Jessica Banham, who asked, do you think bounce rate can indicate the positive in some cases, i.e. the person's question is answered quickly and you need a plumber, you found the contact details on the first page and then you leave? Yeah, absolutely. It very much depends on that last click. For example, a negative bounce might be hitting the home page and then in less than a second leaving again. You know, obviously within that time, somebody's not got any value. If somebody clicks through to contact and clicks on a contact button, then it's that last click which is the important part.
And one thing I would say is ultimately that's where the tracking comes into play. You need to have tracking on your website to understand if they have gone onto the site and they've just decided to call you or something and the bounce rate is high, then you'll understand why that is. So any metrics that you use, you have to use in combination with sort of understanding what the goal of the page is. But also if the bounce rate's high and someone has landed on your page and they've really quickly got the answer to the question and then they just go off your site, if they haven't done anything as a result of that, then your website's pretty useless to your business. There needs to be some sort of action as a result of them going onto your website, I would say, personally.
Yeah, agreed. And we've got another one here around recording apps slowing down websites. Yeah, I mean, look, a majority of websites aren't going to need a recording app on full time. You could easily get enough insights by running it over a weekend or just evenings or, you know, just when you need to. I would suggest minimizing your use of scripts, third-party scripts, as much as you possibly can. But there's no harm, especially with small, medium-sized business websites, to inject it for a weekend, get some data, and then a couple of weeks later, check again after you've made some improvements. Okay, and we've got one. Olivia, do you want to pick up the next one?
Yeah. So do you know how to add in a 404 page to click back to the site? So it depends where it is, but on any website, there will be somewhere in the settings, for example, where you can find my 404 page, and then in that page, you should be able to basically, like you would for any page, write in. Either you won't have to do it in code necessarily, but write what you want on that page, and you just need to simply add a link. So like you would add a link if you were creating a blog, for example, you need to just add a link that says go to this page, for example, or this page. I'm not sure that was the most useful answer, but essentially I would say it's a bit like creating any page on your website. Basically, you just need to find out where the 404 page is in the back end of your website, and simply just add links into that page.
And you can as well download plugins on WordPress if you need to, like custom 404 page plugins, which will give you a bit more flexibility when it comes to creating pages compared to the stock ones which you might have included.
Are there any alternatives to Google Insights for speed checks? And Insight gives a negative when working on a site like Shopify or Wix. I mean, both Shopify and Wix actually have their own tools for checking speed as well, if you want to use that. But there are also like GT metrics. There's a tool called Pingdom. There's a lot of different site speed checking tools out there. It's always useful to use more than one, I would say, actually. Is there an optimum size for images? Personally, I would always go under 50 kilobytes. So there's lots of optimizing images tools that you can use. One I quite like is called Scroosh, I think that's how you say it. And you basically just put the image in, resize, change the size. So if it comes up as 2000 by 1000, you can change that to 700 by 400, which will instantly make it smaller. And then you can change the quality and then just keep moving the quality until it gets to like 50 kilobytes. And then generally, if you set yourself a rule, I mean, you might want to do it bigger than that. It obviously depends what the image looks like and your reason for an image. But I would say if your website isn't highly dependent on images, so you're not a photographer, for example, then you could just have 50 kilobytes images. Is it a good idea to break up text with images? Is there a way to offset any disadvantages of several images? Yes, you can use something called lazy loading, which if you already have like an SEO plugin, for example, installed on your website, there's one called WP Rocket for WordPress. Obviously, again, you don't want to have hundreds of plugins because that can also impact your speed. You have to look at the opportunity cost of different things that you have on your website. Ultimately, if you have nothing, it's going to be fast, but you can implement a plugin and then use something called lazy loading, which basically means that the image doesn't have to load until someone scrolls down to that image. So yes, it's good to break up text with images. You don't need hundreds of images, maybe one or two on a page or in a blog, for example. It depends if the image is useful. I always go back to that being useful. If the image provides absolutely no value, and if it is just there to break it up, then fine. But if you can break up the text with like bullet points or numbers and headings, you can do that as well.
I'll pick up this one from Russell. So yeah, Cloudflare is really, really good. Spam bots wise, it's often recommended, I would say, to change your custom login URL. So like by default, it's normally WP-admin if you're on WordPress. You can change that so it stops a certain amount of attempted attacks. You can also obviously disable comments, which will stop all of the buy Ray-Bans cheap and get some new Nike Airs for £5 added to your website, which can actually throw off the algorithm somewhat when it comes to targeting and kind of dilute the good work that you're putting in. But yeah, Cloudflare is very good. I would really, really recommend it. Apart from when it went down, like for the first time ever, and about half the internet died with it. You may remember, I think it was Gmail and quite a few others all just disappeared off the face of the earth for a few hours. But that's the world we live in. Good. I think that is everything. So, Olivia, do you want to just make sure that everybody has access to the link for the video for Google? And if anybody has any questions.
I'll probably just share it after with the slides and everything. Cool. So I think that'd be easiest because then you can go through and get all the links.
Great. And if anyone has any questions, as always, feel free to pop into your local Nettle studio or email seo@nettle.com and we will happily give you some insights. And apart from that, we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time for the next one.
We do have one more question.
Yep.
How can you track the number of search results your website has? Does Google Analytics offer this? Google Search Console would be best to track the number, the rankings, and the number of pages, number of keywords your site is ranking for. Sorry. There are lots of tools you can use as well, but Search Console has all your keywords and the position that they're ranking.
Good. I think that's it, everyone. So have a great day. Go out and enjoy some sun before the rain again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.